Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us on this panel. We are talking about big goals, new strategies, and the future of high-level philanthropy. We're with some of the biggest philanthropists with us today to talk about how they allocate money, what are their priorities, and how they integrate this in their business life. David Rubenstein, Yuri Milner, Gene Case, and Shmuel Meitar here on stage with me. You know, David, I thought I'd kick it off with you because you have a good story in terms of the Magna Carta. Some of the things that are very important and that you're interested in, you have worked into your philanthropy. Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, first, my view is that very often people tend to think of philanthropy as something you do with educational institutions or medical institutions, medical research, religious organizations, and that's a very good thing, and I do those as well. But I stumbled into something that I now call patriotic philanthropy, though really all philanthropy is probably patriotic. But this is the philanthropy where you're giving something to the U.S. government or anybody's government, wherever you might live, to help them do things that they can't otherwise do. The U.S. government now has fewer funds available for things than it used to, and increasingly, I think Americans should help the U.S. government do certain things. One of the things the U.S. government doesn't have money for is actually preserve some documents that it probably should have. For example, the Magna Carta, there's 17 Magna Cartas in the world, one in private hands. It was auctioned off at Sotheby's a few years ago. I was told it was going to leave the United States, although it wasn't written here. It was the inspiration for the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, so I thought it was important to keep it in the United States. So I went to auction, and although I'm not a famous art collector and didn't really know Sotheby's, I bid and I won. The Sotheby's people didn't know who I was, so they came to me and said, "Who are you, and can you afford this?" And I said yes, and I then said what I was going to do with it, which was to give it back to the U.S. government, in effect, and put it on permanent loan at the National Archives, where it will stay forever. And I got into the habit of buying other historic documents, mostly to remind Americans of how little they know about American history and hope they'll learn more. A recent survey showed that more high school students can name the first three Stooges, first three names, than the names of three founding fathers. And that's a sad situation. So I try to buy some documents and let people know more about them. Last night I announced in Washington that I was going to, in effect, have perfect replicas made of a rare copy of the Declaration of Independence I have with historic frames, and make sure that one is given now to every embassy of the United States all over the world. There are 155 embassies. So when you enter a U.S. embassy, you will see the document that really was the inspiration for our country, which contains the most famous sentence in the English language. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That very famous sentence is really the inspiration for our country and what our country stands for, and I thought it was a good idea to help the government do something maybe it wouldn't have done itself. So I try to do that. It's one part of my philanthropy.
I love that so much. And someone mentioned a story. You came home, your wife said, "How was your day?" And you said, "It was good." Tell the story.
Well, I didn't want to tell anybody in advance that I was going to do it, because it seems a little presumptuous to say I'm going to go buy the Magna Carta tonight, tomorrow. And then when I did do it, that evening, I went to see I had a dinner at the CEO of Citicorp's house, and I just said, "I just bought the Magna Carta. I'm sorry I'm late." And of course he didn't really believe me. And the next day when he read about it in the New York Times, he called me and said, "I'm sorry, I thought you were making a joke. Usually people don't come to my house and say they just bought the Magna Carta." Anyway.
That's so funny. So Yuri, let's talk about some of your priorities. So one of David's priorities, obviously, is preserving the greatness of America and making sure that those important documents are there for all of us to see. Yuri, you're focused on another area, which of course is very important to you, which is science. Talk to us about the prize that you have come up with regard to science, and as it relates to the similarities and differences to the Nobel Prize.
Well, this is the largest prize in the world. This is 3 times bigger than the Nobel Prize. We partnered with Mark Zuckerberg and his foundation, and Sergey Brin and Wojcicki Foundation to launch it. This is really intended to address a fundamental disbalance we believe exists in the modern world, where fundamental science is significantly underappreciated and kind of shifted dramatically away from public attention in the last 20, 30 years. That was not always the case, but at this point in time, out of 100 or even few hundred public figures, one would hardly name any single scientist. We believe that this is not going in the right direction, and that is happening against the backdrop of public funding to fundamental science also going down globally. So we thought that we should try to bring fundamental science a little bit back into spotlight by highlighting the heroes of science and creating a platform for these people to become known. In addition, serving maybe an inspiration for young people to choose that endeavor versus business or some other endeavors.
Yeah, I think it was Tom Friedman who said, when a young person is talking about what they dream about, you rarely hear a person raising their hand and say, you know, I want to be a scientist, I want to be an engineer, as opposed to something else. So talk to us about that, scientists in America. Why is this portion of the economy so important to you?
Well, to begin with, I think it's sort of philosophically important. It used to be called natural philosophy. And there is a very small minority of people that are asking big questions. You know, how did the universe came to be? How did the life got started? You know, when will everything end and in what way? I mean, in many billions of years from now. But I think these are important philosophical questions that our human brains are equipped to answer. And because we can, it means that I think we should. And yet, this whole set of philosophical issues and questions is completely outside of any public interest. And again, that was not always the case. I think a few hundred years ago, it was more in the mainstream of public debate.
Jean, your family foundation is looking at big problems and trying to address them.
That's right.
Talk to us about your priorities.
Sure. Well, for those of you that don't know the Case Foundation, it's a family foundation. My husband, Steve, and I started 15 years ago. We had spent our careers in technology. I retired about that time, and we decided to start a family foundation. And we really became enamored with a number of different things, but specifically the opportunity to look at democratizing philanthropy. As we looked around, we sort of felt like philanthropy should not just be a bunch of rich people writing checks. There's an opportunity for a really big tent. So we've been engaged in a number of different initiatives through the years, but most of them having a very powerful component to create a big tent and get everyone engaged. An example is we've invested in 3 different technology platforms that allow micro donations, $10, $20. And these platforms together, which we've only invested less than $5 million in, have resulted in over $1 billion of giving, really represented by micro donations. So we think there's a really powerful opportunity to democratize philanthropy. And we've learned a lot, actually, from the engagement of sort of many people across the country and across the world getting involved. Because our backgrounds really were in technology, we're very comfortable. We've tried to take the lead, show some new models about how some of the new technology, specifically social media, can be used to engage the public more broadly. We've been excited by that work.
And some of the priorities there, clean water, cancer, what are the most pressing needs that you're trying to address?
So at the Case Foundation, we say we invest in people and ideas that can change the world. And so unlike a lot of foundations, we're not issue specific. When we see a big opportunity for transformational change using a great collaborative that usually crosses sectors, public sector, private sector, NGO, and we see a big opportunity for scale, we'll usually jump in. But it really usually is a catalytic role where we're trying to bring others to the table. We're really trying to create some great momentum.
Shmuel, you mentioned inside that one of your priorities is ensuring that it's transparent when your philanthropy, when you're doing your giving. Talk to us about that. Why is that so important, and what are your priorities?
Maybe I start. I think in my priority, first of all, is to address 2 pillars of society, education and health. I would say any country that gives good education and good health to its citizens will be a good country. Wherever these two pillars are not addressed, we're going to have a problem. So these are the two areas which I address in my philanthropy. On healthcare, I met Mike, we were both diagnosed with prostate cancer in '93. I met him and I joined his effort both in the Prostate Cancer Foundation and Faster Cures, which is a specific cause, one specific cause and one general cause, which is Faster Cures, to address all other diseases to help make them more efficient. In education, I'm trying to transform public education because somehow this area has been left behind, although it's the most important, I would say, part of our society that needs to produce the human capital that we need to be a better country. But the main thing I've found is that giving to institutions money doesn't work. What you need to do is work with your money. As David said, it's got to be part of your life. If you don't take what you do and work with it, it won't happen. Because in the institutions, we're finding that there is no real transparency of how money is spent. And more so, they're not really the most efficient institutions to use the money. And I'll give you an example. Anytime I've given money to an institution and monitored the spending of the money, they didn't spend more than 50% of the money they allocated for a specific project because I was signing the checks and I was asking questions on any money that's being spent. So I find that as an important thing, to work with your money, and giving money is more difficult than making money.
3 points I'd like to add in response to what people have said. First, the concept of democratizing philanthropy. We have to remember that only about 2% of GDP in the United States is given in philanthropic dollars each year. So 2% is nice, and we lead the world. The next highest country is the UK with about 1.3%. Everybody else is, is very, very modest compared to us. So although we're leading the world in philanthropy in terms of dollars as a percentage of GDP, it's still modest. So really, there aren't enough billionaires or very wealthy people to write enough checks that are going to really make all the difference. So what philanthropy really has to be about is getting other people who aren't as wealthy to give money, but also to give their time and their energy. The word philanthropy is an ancient Greek word that means loving humanity. It doesn't mean billionaires writing checks. It means doing things to help other people. And the ancient Greeks, what they did is they coined this word to describe what other people were doing to help people with their time, their energy, the ideas, not with checks. Increasingly, philanthropists should try to encourage other people to get involved, to do what they're doing, but also with their time and their energy, because there's more people out there with time and energy than with dollars, and that's how we're going to really change the world. Secondly, in terms of not just being an adjunct to your life and being integrated into your life, philanthropy is, in my view, something that people should try to do throughout their lives, but integrate it into their lives, not say, I have a bucket of doing my work and then I have another bucket for 2% of my time to do philanthropy. It should be integrated, if they can, into their entire life, and do it not as I did it relatively late in my life, started in my 50s, but try to get your children to do it when they're in their 20s and 30s, so it's a part of their life. And I think that's the only way we're really going to make a real difference in philanthropic giving, is to get everybody who's young to be involved, get people to give their time, their energy, and not just their money. Money is helpful, but I'm disappointed sometimes that when we see the list of the greatest philanthropists in the world, there's a chart here, says here are the top 10 philanthropists, that we measure it only by money as opposed to other things. Take Wendy Kopp, for example. Wendy Kopp created Teach for America. I think it's an incredibly great organization. She's not listed as a great philanthropist because we call what she does social entrepreneurial activity. But the truth is she's had more of an impact than many philanthropists who've given a lot more money by the virtue of her idea and her time and her energy, and we should encourage much more of that.
So it's more than just money, is what you're saying. It's time and energy as important.
So yeah, and on that front, I've had the privilege of working in a collaborative environment on an initiative called Billion Plus Change, and it really underscores what David is saying. Specifically targeted at the corporate sector, it was launched a few years ago with the idea that we'd try to raise $1 billion in talent pro bono going into the nonprofit sector. Why would we do that? When we talked to the nonprofit sector, we learned what they needed to scale and sustain themselves was talent that they couldn't really compete for against the private sector marketplace. Things like marketing, technology, business planning. But where is that talent inside of corporate America and in small businesses in some cases as well? So we launched a Billion Plus Change thinking if we could get $1 billion in commitments from companies all over the United States That would be really, really exciting. As we sit here today, we're over $2 billion in commitments. 350 companies have committed and are playing a role. And it's a great example of using your core competency, putting another oar in the water, if you will, in terms of things that you can deploy to make a difference.
And I love what you said earlier in terms of the micro. You know, you've got small donations and they've added up. And that also underlines what David said in terms of starting young, encouraging folks to start young, even if it's a small donation.
Right.
I agree, absolutely. We, for instance, the Prostate Cancer Foundation, I just funded Chinese scientists to work with American scientists because I believe that that bridge, and what we are finding is that the Chinese government is supporting now a lot of science and scientists. So what we gave is about 10% of what really is happening in the field, and it's growing even more than we can handle.
Mm-hmm. Yuri, what about that? Putting together Chinese scientists with U.S. scientists. What is your take in terms of bringing people together from all over the world with this underlying thought of pushing science?
Well, if you look at the list of our winners of the prize so far, there are not many Chinese winners. And that sort of shows where the top world science is. It's mostly US-centric. And even though many of the winners were born outside the US, they actually live and work in the US. So I think China is coming up there, and in the next maybe decade or two, we will see more Chinese scientists winning Nobel Prize and maybe our prize as well, but not quite yet.
You know, David, you mentioned that the U.S. is the leading in terms of philanthropy, but little by little, you're seeing other very wealthy young people like Yuri, like Mark Zuckerberg, who are not, or Sergey Brin rather, who are not necessarily American, wasn't born in this country, but giving away so much money. So are we moving the needle in terms of ottle countries?
Well, when de Tocqueville came here in the 1830s, he wrote about America that he'd never seen any place that had so many volunteer associations. Everybody was volunteering for everything. He didn't quite understand that because in Europe there wasn't that tradition. The truth is, when our country was started, we didn't have wealthy governments to fund libraries, hospitals, universities, and so the tradition of giving money to get hospitals, fire engine companies, police departments, other things, libraries off the ground, became part of our culture and our fabric. And that culture really has continued for quite some time. In other countries around the world, the governments have basically funded these things, so the tradition didn't grow up that you gave money to things that the government might do. Now, I'd say that if you look at what's going on in the philanthropic movement, over the last 10 or 20 years, as the philanthropic movement has really blossomed in the United States, its greatest impact will not be on the United States, but it will be, if it has any great impact at all, on countries outside these borders. Because if we can get enough people outside of this country to begin to do much more philanthropic kind of activity, that would be the best thing that the U.S. philanthropic movement can do. Because we're only a small part of the world's population, and the population is growing dramatically outside the United States. Only if the tradition of and the culture of giving away money and giving time really comes forward outside the United States will some of the great social problems of the world really be tackled. So I hope if there's a real impact of anything that people in the United States are doing with the Giving Pledge or other things, it's to have an impact outside the United States as much as in the United States.
But, philanthropy, I think we talked earlier, philanthropy needs help. I mean, first of all, thank you for being in this room with us this morning and being part of this conversation. But it really is a little bit of a dysfunctional sector in that there's been lots of years of great intention, money and talent brought to solving problems, and not many problems solved. And if you peel back that onion and you look at it, you can get a little discouraged. But on the occasion of our 15th anniversary, we kind of asked the question, so what's up with that? Why is it that a lot of things people have tried to attack, whether it be poverty, hunger, disease, et cetera, they haven't been able to break through, but there are true bright spots, and what does that look like? So we hired some experts to go to work on that. And it turns out that there are some principles that are in play wherever you see transformational change in an initiative, a movement, you name it. And they really come down to a couple of things. And, David was talking about how de Tocqueville, saw the country early. And we think about all the people, the great patriots who started our country, but really entrepreneurs started our country too. They built great companies, they supported our communities. And it's not surprising then that the things that have broken out in philanthropy have very similar qualities to an entrepreneurial kind of approach. It's things like embrace a really big idea, a swing for the fences idea, take risks, experiment a lot, be willing to accept that failure might be an option, which I don't know how you guys feel, but I think there really is a sense in philanthropy that it's not okay to ever fail with tax-benefited dollars. And this idea of collaboration is very, very powerful as well in terms of something that we see where philanthropy has been effective.
That's a great point. If we could put up slide number 7, I thought that was interesting in terms of where the philanthropy money is coming from. And the largesse is individuals at 73%.
That's right.
14% foundations, bequests at 8%, and corporations 5%. Do any of these numbers surprise anyone on the panel?
In the US, it's understandable because of the tax structure. Because you've got here very high death duties, or I forget the estate duty, and gift. So this is a way, the giving is part of your tax planning, which doesn't necessarily exist in other places in the world to encourage. But I think I would like to comment on what David said about really teaching the world to give, which is very important because it's not as common outside, especially if you go to Asia. Like when I supported the Chinese researchers, I wanted to find a Chinese that will take on 1 or 2, and I was laughed at. That what are you talking about? They're all going to steal the money and nothing will happen. So they wouldn't even, I couldn't find one Chinese to support a Chinese scientist. And the other thing about the dysfunctionality of philanthropy, I agree with you completely. But so what we really need is human capital to join the money. The most important thing in anything that we do is human capital. The wealth of the United States is not in natural resources, it's in human capital. So what we need to bring into philanthropy, human capital, that's why anybody in the audience that feels that joining a cause is something you would like to do, the money is looking for you. Mm-hmm. The money is looking for good people to join in and work the cause because we're struggling. It's not easy to give and achieve a goal. It's easy to give and get a plaque. If you want an honor, you want respect, you want to service your ego, that's easy. I can give you tons of places you can give your money and you can get it. But if you really want to achieve measurable results, not just statistical results, you need to work very hard at it.
Which is what David said earlier in terms of your time.
Yes, on bequests, you see it's about 8%. I think that will increase because we do have tax incentives in our country, for better or worse, for this to happen. I'm involved in a number of organizations where we have societies that are part of the donor base, and these are people who put in their will the organization. I always say, are we going to feed these people with high cholesterol food when we have events because we want them to maybe leave their money sooner? But as a general rule, they say no, they're not doing that, but you never know what's in their food. But I also feel that people should, in philanthropic endeavors, recognize that there's many reasons to give, and I like to cite, when I talk to people about philanthropy, I say there are 3 reasons you should really be involved in philanthropy. One is selfish. When you give away money or you help other people, you feel better about yourself. And when you feel better about yourself, you're likely to live longer. So the selfish reason to give away money or do something is you're going to live longer. Very few people give away money or help other people say, geez, I feel terrible, I just gave away some money. I feel bad about myself, I just helped other people. So you'll feel better about yourself, and I have a theory that this will make you live longer. Secondly, it's a natural human instinct to want to help other humans who are not necessarily part of their family. Other mammals really tend to help they're members of their family. They don't have a great instinct to help people who aren't part of their families, whereas humans are different. And I think when you help other people, I do think you have you're really going forward with a natural human instinct. I think it's a good thing. A third reason I tell people is you might get to heaven more quickly by doing something in philanthropy. Now, we can't guarantee that, but why would you take a chance? And third point is that in terms of giving overseas, as you mentioned, Chinese, the Giving Pledge people would have really tried very hard to get people outside the United States to enter into this movement. So far, about 90-some people in the United States have signed up, and less than probably 10 overseas. And the impact that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Melinda Gates have had in trying to recruit people has been not as great as they would like, because in China and Russia and Latin America, other parts of the world, people are just not as accustomed to giving away up to half their money. And so we've moved the Giving Pledge sense to not have separate groups around the world, but to have it all be part of one group, because it's just too difficult to get 50 people in China to agree to do this, or 50 people in Europe to agree to do this. But still, the movement is moving forward, and I think we do have to recognize the United States is going to have to take the lead in the philanthropic movement.
Yes, so slow slides 1 and then 2, because you really have an idea of the global stance here. We saw this earlier, the 10 philanthropists of the world, and if you see the second slide here, number 2, it also bears that out. As you can see, you have a handful of Asia, as well as Russia as well, Ukraine. So let me ask you about the needs in the world, and that would be slide number 8. You all have your own ideas in terms of where the giving should go, and I thought this chart was really interesting. Religion, 32%, education, 13%, gifts to foundation, 9%, human services, 12%, health is 8%, international affairs, 8%, and other, 18%. Thoughts on this in terms of where the needs are?
It doesn't matter what the needs are. What you find is that people want to give what they believe in. And I think to try to change their idea is very difficult. We're better off letting them do what they want to do and supporting them and encouraging them. In the doing, they will come to conclusions. But the key thing is to get them personally involved with the cause that they believe in, and possibly to have like a master plan so that everybody works together and doesn't fight each other.
Why is religion the biggest portion on this chart?
Well, that's because, well, people think they might get to heaven more quickly if they give. You never know. But I think it's a very important point. About 1/3 of all U.S. giving is to religious organizations, people's churches, synagogues, and so forth. And I think because that is the largest part, and because the ministers and others have so much influence in many ways, I think that is the principal reason why there probably will not be a significant cutback in the charitable contribution. Eventually, we're going to have to get more revenue in this country, and eventually there's going to be some limitations on deductions, the principal ones being the mortgage interest deduction, the municipal bond deduction, the state and local income tax deduction, and the charitable. But I think because of the influence of the religious movement, I think they have swarmed over Washington to make sure that probably that deduction is not going to be eliminated or modified very much. And I suspect we in the philanthropic movement owe a lot to the religious organizations, because they're probably going to have more impact on Congress than the rest of those people who are trying to lobby not to have the charitable deduction eliminated or modified.
But in fairness, that religion number, if you peeled it back, is not just money going to the churches, the synagogues, and the mosques. Much of that money is going through religious organizations out into the community to meet many of those needs that you see on the rest of the pie. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. The second, other than other, the second highest, as you see, is education. And in philanthropy, one thing we know well is that communities of people and people you know and feel comfortable with are really where you want to give your time, spend your time, and give your money. And this is really what we can create in philanthropy, as we were talking earlier about trying to create a bigger tent. Social media can do a wonderful thing.
Amazing.
I completely agree with your point that people have to pick their passion areas and don't try and move them off that. But at the same time, some people can be influenced and jazzed by new things they find out their friends care about. And it goes back to that point we were talking about earlier about democratizing philanthropy. I do think religion and education will shift just a little bit as people become more aware and have an opportunity to get engaged, because their communities of friends and people they know have safely introduced them into things they care about and can get engaged in.
On the international affairs part, it's 8%. You'd say relatively modest, and what that consists of largely is a lot of aid that goes to the emerging markets. Bill Gates and among others have done enormous amounts of work in Africa, for example, and Latin America and parts of Asia. One of the things I think is very interesting, and I don't know how we're going to deal with it, it's something we'll have to focus on the next couple of years, is as emerging markets get wealthier and wealthier, they're saying, well, geez, maybe we can help this place called the United States. They have terrible infrastructure, They have still a lot of poverty. They have some problems, social problems they haven't addressed adequately. Maybe we'll take our money from China or Russia or Brazil and give it to the United States. And I don't know what the reaction will be here, because we're used to giving money to other countries and having them say, yes, you can have your social policies kind of perpetuated in our country. Yes, we want your money, and you can do what you want with that money in our country. Will we let these people from other countries tell us how we want to, how they want to kind of modify our country? I don't know the answer to that, but it's going to be an interesting question, because as money begins to come into this country from overseas, I'm not sure we'll be as receptive to it as we have found our contributions being received overseas.
That's a great point.
The emerging countries are looking for recognition, and the people there are looking for recognition. This is the more, so partnering with American philanthropists or partnering over a cause, in giving them the recognition, that's what will be able to turn the trend,
A lot of
bring
points,
them into the field.
pardon me, a lot of points being made. I want to talk about your points on social media and how technology can really enable things. Yuri, why don't you jump in on this one? In terms of the science prize, has social media helped in terms of getting the word out, in terms of organizing excitement around this?
Well, it's
The tip of the
interesting that
iceberg.
it's interesting that if you look at this chart, science is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
It's completely non-existent.
Well, maybe it's under education?
Well, it's not the same thing. And I think if you break others, science will probably be non-existent there too. And yet, if you think about it, most of what we see around us is a result of a scientific discovery 100, 250 or 20 years ago, internet or electricity or nuclear. And scientific discovery, by definition, always belongs to everybody. You cannot patent scientific discovery, especially if it is a fundamental discovery. So people who are doing these amazing discoveries, they are not only making any money because of this, because it's a public good. They are also significantly underappreciated, and yet a tremendous percentage of GDP now completely depends on those discoveries that were made some time ago. So it's really interesting, this balance that I think is so evident to me. I'm not commenting on other worthy endeavors, but science is just my little passion. So,
You're absolutely right, but you need to start at an earlier age. We need to the educating to science needs to start in primary school. That's where we need to get, and the technology can make children curious. This is what I'm trying to do. How do you engage children to become curious about learning? And that will transform public schools.
Yeah, Maria, Bill Gates, we've all heard him say, I think, that obviously he and Melinda have a huge foundation with tremendous resources, but it is truly a drop in the bucket compared to what the public sector will spend on the same issues. There is an opportunity to use technology, even in our public sector, to better inform their work, to make it smarter and more effective. The Case Foundation hosted, together with the White House, a summit on innovation, and the idea there was using prizes and grand challenges across the nation to find talent, to find ideas. And we had 35 federal agencies that we trained. The president wrote a presidential order compelling the agencies to try these prizes and grand challenges, mostly using social media. And out of that, some really, really remarkable things happened. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at technology and look at ways to make sort of the big numbers more effective, as well as the numbers we see on that screen.
Particularly if you're trying to engage young people.
Right.
Whether with their money or with their time. And I guess that, is there something, do you think, that moves the needle in terms of engaging young people?
I think you need to find them where they are. And where they are today is on on a mobile phone, using social media, and leverage that. And that's where their community is.
If 20 years ago, if you went to the top colleges in the United States and said to the top graduates, where would you like to spend your initial years after college, they would say Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, McKinsey, and so forth. I think it's changed a bit. Now people say they want to go to Teach for America, or they want to start their own initiative. Many times they are social entrepreneur types initiatives that are designed to help the world become a better place. The real question to me is whether 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, these individuals will say, well, now that I've got a family, a mortgage, and so forth, I really want to go into the capitalist world and make more money as opposed to continue these social initiatives that are trying to make the world a better place. I hope it's not the case that they abandon those things, but right now, clearly the best students in the best colleges want to make a difference, and they want to do it now, and they don't want to go to Goldman Sachs necessarily. They want to do something that they think will make the world a better place. I hope that trend will continue.
And that has to do with a number of things. I mean, first off, the financial crisis, I guess, pushed people to, redirect and reassess their lives.
But you see, with young people, it all goes by what's cool. When you speak to a young person, that's the key thing. How do we convince them that being cool is helping? Because right now, it's not necessarily where it is. So if we could bring into the teenage world the idea that helping even your friend, rather than harassing a friend, or sort of that it's cool to help and that will build you in society, that's the transformation that we need to
It's also with so-called, quote, older people in this sense. It used to be the case that when you retired at 55 or 60, you went and played golf, or you did something else that basically meant sitting on the beach or not really working that hard, relaxing. Now, as people retire, sometimes with more money than they thought they were going to have at 55 or 60, they're saying, hey, I'm not ready to go to the beach. I actually want to do something that's better, that's going to help the world. And so we're seeing more and more people who are kind of post-retirement age now doing things. And because we have longer longevity or better longevity now, you're finding people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s trying to do things which I think are going to be quite creative as well and help make the country and the world a better place as well. And that's a major change in the way people have looked at things before. That is that after you got to a certain age, you retired, you didn't really do anything to help the world become a better place. Now, what is old age and so forth? I increasingly think that it's older and older than I am, because when I turned 60, I realized, people began to look at me differently. They say to you, well, you look good today. Well, how are you supposed to look when you're 60? Or like I'm the chairman of the Kennedy Center in Washington, and we go around to events. There's the 7 steps or so forth. A young woman who's escorted me around, she's 25 years old. She'll say, Mr. Rubenstein, can you walk these 7 steps, or would you like to take the elevator? So, people do look at you differently when you're 60, but I do think that people who are in their 60s and 70s can contribute a lot, hopefully, and therefore it's not just the young people, but it's the older people who are going to try to make the world a better place as well.
I love that.
I agree with every word you said there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But I think we're going to learn a lot from the millennials. I'm very bullish on them. I think they'll be our next greatest generation. They're significantly idealist. They see the world differently, certainly than my generation did. They don't care about if it's government, if it's nonprofit, if it's business. They care about changing the world. And many of them are creating new companies that are going to change the world and possibly be more effective than they would be if they turned it into a nonprofit. We work with them closely. They guide a lot of the work that we undertake and that we take forward. And I think we should feel very encouraged. I think it's a very idealistic generation.
And I love what you said. You've got to go where the people are. And that means the mobile phone, and that means, social networking and technology. What do you think about that, Yuri, in terms of the millenniums changing the world? I mean, you see this group in a number of ways throughout your life, whether it's through your investing or through your philanthropy, the millenniums.
Well, my partners are basically pretty young people. They are among the 3 top donors under 40.
Mark Zuckerberg.
And Sergey Brin, his wife. And this generation is pretty close to the generation that you have in mind. And they actually, in their business lives, building companies that are at the forefront of making life cool for these young generations. By the way, the chairman of the board of our foundation is Art Levinson, who's the chairman of Apple and chairman of Genentech. Yeah, so it's an interesting combination of people representing companies that are really at the forefront of technology innovation.
And do you feel that their thinking is, in terms of integrating into their business and innovation life, also integrating giving back? Is that sort of part of the fabric of how they think?
Well, I think so. I think it's sort of a Silicon Valley thing now to start giving very early, as many people mentioned. 2 out of 3 are from Silicon Valley. And I think they're sort of paving the way for other people. I think maybe Mark Zuckerberg is the leading figure under 30, in fact. It's not under 40 even.
Wow.
But
He's not 30 yet?
almost.
Okay. That's great.
But I'm sorry. One of the phenomenons that we're seeing with people like Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin, or really with Bill Gates and others,
Or
is
Yuri.
something that hadn't existed for
Or Yuri.
Or Yuri.
or Yuri
No,
hadn't
I'm
existed
50.
in previous generations. Historically, if you made a lot of money, you kind of made it in your 50s or 60s as a result of what you had started to build in your 30s and 40s. In the 50s and 60s, you made an enormous amount of money. Then in your 70s, you kind of figured out what to do with it. In some cases, you gave it away. In some cases, you just gave it to your next generation, and so forth. Now we're seeing a phenomenon where people in their 20s and in their 30s become fabulously wealthy, wealthier than anything anybody could have imagined before, or they could have imagined. So what do you do when you have $20 billion and you are 30 years old? I mean, you know, what are you going to do with it? You're going to say, well, I got to double that because when I'm 40, I want to have $40 billion. Probably not. So at some point, people recognize that the amount of money is more than they can possibly really expend, and they really want to do something, I think, to make the world a better place. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. I think they all recognize that being like the ancient pharaohs, being buried with your wealth, really is not such a wonderful thing, because when you're buried with your wealth, it turns out that grave robbers take it anyway. So many people have recognized that being buried with your wealth isn't probably a good thing. So many of these younger people now are really working very hard to kind of figure out how best to give it away. And you're seeing people retire from the business world at a relatively young age. Bill Gates retired essentially when he was 50 years old. And I think you'll see more and more of these very young multi-billionaires retiring at a relatively young age and then trying to do much more to make the world a better place.
Maria, I think the media that you come from, you can play a huge role in promoting these ideas. Sort of because all of these people, like David said, they're young, they don't know what to do. They're really lost, and getting so much money at an early age, it's confusing. Because when it suddenly happens to you, they're all struggling. So if the media would encourage them and promote what they're doing, that's all. So I'm really asking you to jump in and help promote young people becoming philanthropists.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons I've got Yuri Milner coming on the show today, by the way, and I'm doing regular things with Bill and Melinda, actually, with what they're doing, certainly on polio and what they've done throughout Africa.
But, you know, your
But you're
question was, I think, you know, should they give back in their companies, et cetera. I think a couple of things. I mean, I think we tend to be a little bit biased that the best way to make a difference is to use your core assets and skills. And, you know, will some of these people retire and then create great philanthropies, and would that be great? Yes, it would. But many of them have a greater potential using their companies, using the very thing they're good at today to make a difference in the world. And, you know, the exciting thing for me is I think we're not only seeing that in companies that young people are running, but even if you look at big old companies like IBM and GE, when you look at their portfolio of products and services today, you can't tell what's being led out of the foundation in some cases versus what is their core business offerings that's changing the world. And it's very, very exciting to see. I think the influence of millennials who make a decision about where they're going to go to work, you know, the coin dropped with the companies. They know they have to be thinking about how to be a bigger player in terms of their impact on society to attract the best and the brightest.
That's a great point, because people are going to go where they believe that company is actually giving toward the important needs in the world.
That's right.
And if it's part of the culture of the company, the giving, then being promoted in the company goes with how you're giving to society and so forth and how efficient you are. So it's a good way, and they have numbers. Because when you retire, you lose your employees and you don't have influence while you're at the going, so you have the big numbers to influence.
I want to look at slide number 6. This is pretty interesting here, and this is the 14 donors out of the top 50 live in California. It's I mean, obviously partly due to the wealth, I guess, around technology, but here are the
Maybe
top
the weather.
and the top 50 donors of 2012. 14 donors live in California, more than any other state. 22 nonprofits in the state were beneficiaries, also more than any other state. Thoughts on that chart?
Well, of course, California is by itself about the 11th biggest economy in the world, so it's not surprising to have the most people there. Whether all these people are living in California and paying taxes in California, I don't know. If they were paying tax in California, they might not be able to give away as much money because some of them may be living other places, who knows. But there's no doubt that California, because it has had so much wealth created in the Silicon Valley area, and as Los Angeles has become the second biggest city in the world, in the United States, and create a lot of wealth as a result of it, you do have enormous numbers of very wealthy people who live in the Los Angeles area and the Silicon Valley area. So it's not that surprising in many respects. But I do think that I suspect that the second biggest would be in New York, and probably the third, I guess, would probably be Texas, I suspect. And that probably reflects general populations. But increasingly, you're going to see a lot of wealthy people living in other states other than these large states, and they are going to be giving away a lot of money as well.
How are fundraising going right now? I mean, we came off an economy that I guess, we're in recovery mode. Have things gotten better post the financial crisis of 2008 in terms of engaging people to give, in terms of raising funds? What can you tell us about the status?
We in the Prostate Cancer Foundation and Faster Cures are finding it lately more difficult because we're losing funds through government cuts, the sequester and so forth, and it's more difficult. And we are looking for new ways to encourage crowdfunding, to encourage other ways, because it's not that easy, and the struggle for the buck is much more problematic.
Capital campaigns are an American invention, so every university has a capital campaign, every organization is in a capital campaign mode. They are all doing okay, but not spectacularly well. And we're raising less money in the philanthropic area than we did really in 2007. So it's going to take a while to get back to the 2007 level and get above that. I do think that all these large capital campaigns, they really tend to focus on the large donors, because as a general view, it's just easier to raise money from somebody who's going to give you 10 or 20 or $30 million for a project than to go get a whole bunch of people to give you $10,000. That probably will continue for a while. I think you're going to see some other large capital campaigns being launched by large universities because they feel that to be competitive, they have to keep raising money, and it's a cycle which never really ends. It used to be the capital campaign for a university happened once every 10 or 15 years. Now it's every couple of years. Once they finish, they start one about a year later. And that's because the need for money in universities and hospitals and libraries is just increasing dramatically. Also because the funding from the federal government is going to go down fairly significantly. NIH funding is going down fairly dramatically. The sequester is going to bite at some point, and the sequester is not going away. The sequester is here for the foreseeable future, at least the next 10 years. And so you're going to get less money coming out of the federal government for a lot of organizations that really depended on it, and therefore the need to raise more from the private sector will be there, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough to really make up the difference.
So one of the largest sources of raising funds now, you won't believe it. One is at the cashiers in Safeway. We get a huge amount of money collected by people giving $1 when they're paying their that, and that's growing tremendously every year. And the second source is something called Movember, where it's an Australian idea when you grow a mustache during the month of November, and people who are your supporters send in small money, and that's growing. That raises about $100 million a year. You cannot believe, if you recruit the crowds with a good idea, how much money can be raised.
I'll be surprised if 50 years from now we look back and say the best way to change the world was to write grants to organizations. Is it important? It really is. But I serve as a trustee at National Geographic Society, and for those of you that don't know, it was one of the first social enterprises. What we mean by that, of course, is that they utilized earned income at the same time expanding their mission. At first it was a newsletter, then it became a magazine, then it became a cable channel, and of course today is transitioning to digital. The key point there is they've not been a hat-in-hand organization. They've been able to build strategies, build business plans, scale and sustain themselves because they had earned income revenue that they earned off of their core mission. And in our work with both nonprofits and new companies, we really want to encourage people to embrace other models that don't simply rely on people writing philanthropic checks to keep them going.
Yeah, I love the idea that it starts micro, and you're seeing that. You made the point initially. We want to open it up to questions, so do think about questions. We'll get the microphones to you. As the microphones are coming around, we've got one person right here in the third row here, and second and third row, actually. Thank you. All right, we'll start right there. Yes, sir? And then
Hi.
one, two.
Oh, sorry. Let me go?
Yeah.
Hi, Michael D. Listen, what I'm really interested in is the intersection between government and philanthropy. When I zoom out and look at it, on the one hand, there's a desire to cut discretionary spending in the United States, which is affecting the poor, it's affecting school lunches, it's affecting NIH, and that's occurring because people don't want to pay higher taxes. And philanthropy, when you break philanthropy down, you've talked about, excuse me, capital, and you've talked about labor. And you want more labor, but we don't give a tax deduction for labor. But we give a tax deduction for capital. Does philanthropy need a tax deduction for capital? Should we give a tax deduction for labor? And are our national priorities completely wrong such that we're not willing to pay taxes, but yet we're willing to take a tax deduction in order to do the things that we're telling government that we're not willing to pay them to do?
This is one of those questions where the government can actually be very helpful in a world where we are seeing austerity and cuts. How does the tax situation change things? But David, why don't you take his question?
Well, that is it's actually a very good question. You don't live in Washington, D.C., right?
I live in Singapore.
Okay. All right, because in Washington, D.C., that would be a question nobody would ask, because you can't ask those kind of questions in Washington, D.C., because they would say, well, you don't understand Washington, D.C., and it can't happen, and so forth. But it's a very good question. The truth is, yes, we do have a strange system where we won't tax people enough to do the very things that we think government should do, so we have the private sector do it, and we give them a deduction. But it's not something that's going to be changed anytime soon, and they will not give a tax for labor or tax deduction for labor because it's too difficult to measure and so forth and so on. But I think the real problem we have in the federal government now, and it's not going to change anytime soon, is that there is no desire on the part of the Republicans in the House to really increase taxes. And as a result of that, nothing is really going to get done. I think that some Republicans in the Senate might be willing to have some tax increases, but you're not going to see taxes go up. Even though the tax burden in the United States is actually lower than it has historically been in many areas, it's not going to go up right now. And as a result, I think you're going to not see a big change in the system. If anything, we're probably going to, if not reduce taxes, we're going to keep them probably about where they are now for the foreseeable future, and we're going to cut spending. And because all of a sudden we've decided to cut the deficit much more than maybe people thought would be necessary. The deficit is actually coming down now, and we're probably going to have a much smaller deficit this year than we've had in the last 5 or 6 years. And as that trend continues, I think people in Washington will want to continue it, and therefore they will just cut spending as the way to kind of keep it coming down.
But didn't we see an impact on charitable giving when we did see the tax change at the end of 2012?
Well, there was a theory that at the end of 2012, people would start giving a lot more money because they thought that the tax deduction would go away. But I don't really know that there was that much of a bump up. I don't really see. Was there not much of a bump up? I didn't really see that.
There was not. And I want to go to the question. I thought it was a great question as well. And I think if you don't live in Washington, you might be unaware. The federal government actually makes a significant investment in trying to drive human capital or volunteerism or pro bono work. There's an agency that was started, was the vision of President H.W. Bush, taken forward under President Clinton, and really celebrated and backed by the most recent presidents. It's called the Corporation for National Service, and over $1 billion a year goes into that to try to drive volunteerism. And if we saw that map differently, not based on money, but based on time, you would see Utah and Minnesota as the leading states, not California where the money is. And there isn't necessarily an alignment between where the philanthropic giving is and where the philanthropic time is being spent.
Also, we might want to look at slide number 10, by the way. This is the 2011 reported impact investments, where the real impact is. Got a question in the third row right there.
Yes, Francine Lafrac. On your slide, besides science, women and girls issues were completely missing. Women in this country control 60% of the money. Yet in terms of philanthropy and in terms of supporting women and girls issues, it's minimal. It's like 2%, and 5% go to breast cancer and cancers. But 2% support women and girls issues. What strategies can you suggest to encourage women who won't control 60% of the money in this country, soon it'll be 70%, to become philanthropic and support women and girls issues?
Yeah, and particularly in an environment where women and girls are still facing horrible situations in many places in the world.
I would like to answer. One, I think you are right. And I appreciate what you're saying. But my question to you is, why don't you do it? That's okay. Get together and lead it. Elect your leaders and make it happen.
I'm quoting you. You said we have the money, but to get the metrics, it's very
No, I mean get the women together, not the money.
I think we're trying to come up with some strategies to help us.
So it'll
How do
only
you engage? How do you engage to make sure that this subject, I mean, forums like this actually have been helpful. You know, Milken as well as CGI, President Clinton has put this at the top of his agenda at CGI. But what do you?
I think that women should start forming their own organizations for a cause and start small and slowly grow. Like David was telling us the history of philanthropy, of donating to your library, donating to your church and so forth. Get together over a cause, 10 women, decide on a cause and try to build. And some will succeed and some will fail, and that will make it.
That's you make a very good point. Think about it, 60% going to 70%. You would think that maybe 60 or 70% of the money would go to those issues. But think about this. Right now, more than 50% of the voters in the United States are female.
Yes.
Yet we don't have 50% of our elected office holders female, or maybe 100%. So it's clear that women, either for historic or cultural reasons or whatever, don't feel yet comfortable being voting only for women or giving money to only so-called women causes. I don't have it's a more complicated subject than I can address right now, but it is a very important point that women aren't yet feeling as liberated as maybe they should be to focus on those issues which might affect them more than maybe issues that don't affect them.
I can comment on that as well. So the UN Foundation has led some really important work around women and girls, and not just women and girls as beneficiaries, but women and girls getting engaged as leaders. The Fortune's Most Powerful Women has had a mentoring program forever. I've been a part of that and have loved my time taking young women from around the world and basically trying to grow them both as business leaders and philanthropists. We've seen a lot of heat in this area, and I think there are some really great starts. It reminds me that the word isn't getting out, that it's a passion area that you have, and you don't necessarily know where to start. I mean, Goldman Sachs has 10,000 women as well. So we've seen a number of big idea initiatives coming forward, and obviously the word just has to spread somehow.
I would
Young
add
women
that
also need mentors, and they need to be out front.
But add that Melinda Gates obviously is a very important figure in the philanthropic world, and she's going to spend the bulk of her time in philanthropy in the future on a woman's issue, which is family planning, which is quite courageous because she is raised as a Catholic, and obviously there have been a lot of issues associated with the concern about family planning by people in the Catholic Church. But I think she will be a very important symbol of a woman now saying, I have a lot of money at my disposal, and I'm going to focus on an issue that is probably a woman's issue as much as anything is.
Yeah.
By the way, do you see many women getting the science prize?
We have 3 women out of 20.
There was 2 girls that won the Google Prize last year, so
Great.
that was
That
encouraging.
is. That's
They
terrific.
were the
That's
winners.
very encouraging. Yes, Esther. We have a question here, and then we'll go to that side. Okay, first here.
So I hope this is not too off topic, but something that fascinates me is the philanthropic behavior of for-profit corporations. Not we're going to donate 1% to breast cancer, or we're going to do, we have this corporate social responsibility program, but corporations actually doing something in their core business. In digital, it's often so easy. You have a paid-for service, but you also have a free version that goes to people who can't afford it, startups, whatever. Restaurants give their food to the poor. Lots of large companies, I think, have surplus training programs. They have people who maybe they could lay off that they could instead turn into mentors into the community. I would love to see that quantified and encouraged, because you're much more likely to be effective doing something that's part of your core than you are giving 1% of your revenues off to somebody else who doesn't know how to do much with it.
No question, and hopefully you heard me speak to that, Esther. It was actually in 2008 when we started Billion Plus Change, launched at the White House, and much of that talent came from employees that might have otherwise been laid off during that period, but they were deployed into the nonprofit sector.
I think it would be a good thing if corporations which announce philanthropic endeavors were to see their stock prices go up, because the public is so happy that they're doing this. Right now, when they announce major philanthropic endeavors, their stock price doesn't go up. People say, well, geez, maybe their earnings are going down. But if people were to realize that the company might actually be better off and actually be healthier, and more people want to work for the company, do things with the company, and their stock price would go up as a result of that, I think more companies would do things like this. We've got to find more examples of companies whose stock price went up when they announce some major philanthropic endeavor, and I hope that will happen. But that's probably what's going to compel CEOs to give more money away.
Well, also,
Maybe you need a vice president of philanthropy that his bonus is linked to the price of the share.
Yep, yep. Or you need tax policy that encourages these companies. I mean, let's face it, they're not going to do something that is going to be more expensive and that they feel they have to justify to shareholders.
Well, maybe on your show you should talk more about great companies that are doing philanthropic things and get more publicity for it.
Fair enough, yeah. So right over there. Microphone on the right? Right there, standing up. Thank you.
I'm curious, there are over 1 million 501c3 nonprofits in the country, and I understand there's about 1,000 new ones being created almost every week. I know one of my teenage daughters and a couple of friends are starting one. One of my concerns is this just isn't sustainable, that in fact people need to partner, that we're going to see some great consolidation happen as some of these nonprofits 3, 4, 5 years are just falling apart. All the infrastructure required, there's a little bit in, I think this generation, the younger ones, the millennials, are desperate to change the world, but they're a little naive about what it takes. I know Mrs. Case mentioned some of the disappointment with some of the great institutions have maybe not made things happen that they could have. How do you reconcile that? Any thoughts on that? Concerns?
My own view is that it's a gift that they're naive. I think that naivete, are they going to make mistakes? Are they going to trip along the way? Yes. But in the process, they may show us some new ways forward. I also am really encouraged by crowdfunding. The platforms I talked about earlier and the crowdfunding we'll see coming with the Jobs Act, because if you think about things like Kickstarter today, you can actually get things funded without forming a 501c3. And there are many people who will write checks without tax advantage just because they care about making a difference. I'm hoping that will minimize the number of new 501c3s that come forward because there are other avenues to capital.
I would add that the great changes in the world, in business and in other areas, usually occur from people who are in their 20s. People in their 50s and 60s, they might get a lot of awards and be feted a lot, but the truth is they don't probably change the world as much as people in their 20s with great changes in terms of technology and so forth. So there are going to be a lot of mistakes made by people in that era, that age group. But I analogize it to, as you know, it takes a million sperm to kind of fertilize an egg, and so, but one eventually makes it, and you don't know which of those great ideas is going to come from a young teenager or a young person in their 20s, but we have to encourage them to do it, because in the end, we're not going to have fertilized products. In the end, we really want to have one great idea that produces a Google or a Facebook or something like that, because they really do change the world.
It's interesting that most of the discoveries are made when somebody is relatively young, and yet most of the prizes people get when they are very old. I mean, Nobel Prize is a famous example that you have to wait now for 40, 50 years to get a Nobel Prize, and our prize is actually designed to address that issue so that people can get prizes immediately after they make a discovery.
Yeah, I mean, innovation comes from risk-taking. And the principles I talked about earlier that we found present in transformational change, we have encapsulated under a campaign called Be Fearless. And we feel strongly that in philanthropy, we need to be more fearless.
Absolutely.
And, I think it's wonderful that young people are coming in, trying new things, because the old ways aren't working so well. And I think that's where we'll find innovation. And I think hopefully the rest of us can look at what they're doing and learn from it.
So that's slide 11. What are we being fearless about? Walk us through this be fearless.
Sure. Well, I mentioned some of this earlier, so I'll just repeat it quickly. In philanthropy, it was our experience and the experience of many of our partners as well, that you don't talk about your failures, and that there's really not necessarily a comfort with taking dollars that are tax advantaged and putting them at great risk. I learned this firsthand. We were engaged in a major clean water initiative in sub-Saharan Africa. We had brought our resources and our leadership to it. We launched it at CGI. It was a big deal. We had hundreds of partners. We were in over 1,000 villages in sub-Saharan Africa, and we realized it wasn't working. And it was a really powerful moment for us because we were really tempted to just kind of sweep it under the rug. We really didn't want to talk about it. So we spent about a year trying to write it, and it wasn't getting righted. And so we had a decision to make. What were we going to do? Were we going to be disingenuous and pretend everything was okay and slowly slip away? Or were we going to come clean? So I wrote a blog called The Painful Acknowledgement of Coming Up Short, and transparently talked about how we really had failed in this initiative against the goals we had set out. So I mentioned our foundation's 15 years old. I write stuff all the time, whether it's in the media or in our own stuff. Never, ever have I had the response like I had from just acknowledging that we had a failure. Because believe it or not, it's radical in philanthropy to talk about your failures. People don't want to do it. So we've been leading something in the last year under this Be Fearless campaign, Fail Fests, in rooms like this, where we encourage people to stand up, talk about your real stinkers, what didn't work, because you just don't find innovation and breakthrough unless you have a few losers. At the foundation, if we don't have a few red lights at the end of the year of things we've tried, we say we're not trying hard enough. Because if it's all just easy and it's all going so well, we're not innovating. And as a sector, I think we feel strongly that it's something that we all need to link arms and agree together that we're going to be a little more fearless.
That's terrific. Great analysis.
Thank you.
We have a question up here and then back there. Go ahead,
I
David.
agree that life is really about the revenge of the nerds in this sense. When everybody is young, you're in grade school and high school and so forth, nobody wants to be socially ostracized. So everybody wants to be accepted, everybody wants to be in the right fraternity, the sorority, and everybody be part of a social group that's acceptable. Nobody wants to be set aside, but actually the people who are not part of the fraternities and society and sororities and not really part of the in crowd, they are the ones who actually, the nerds, who actually change the world. So I suspect Bill Gates wasn't probably a big fraternity person. I don't know, but I suspect he was not. And Sergey Brin probably wasn't a big fraternity person. So in the end, it's the people who are not afraid of failure or not afraid of being ostracized or not afraid of doing something different that really do change the world. So increasingly, we got to tell people, don't worry about being socially accepted so much, and don't worry about always being successful and always being praised when you're young. Worry about doing something that is different and try to do something different, because those are the people who are actually going to make the world a better place.
Question here.
I'd like to admit to a failure since
Yes,
you opened
Yay! A fearless man.
I work for an organization that gives over $200 million a year in philanthropy each year. And the biggest part of it goes to education. And yet I still think it's a huge failure, because the schools that are ready to accept our help are already in pretty good shape. They're organized, they know how to receive. And so we fail to reach out to the ones who need us the most. And it's frankly so frustrating to put $100 million a year into education and see so little of it going to the places that need us the most. And I'm open to any suggestions and help you could offer.
What's your organization?
Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you become CEO of the organization, then you can fix that.
I'll get your vote.
Okay.
You know, what we advise in that situation, because every organization is going to be different on this fearless scale in terms of their comfort level with risk. If you can peel off whatever's comfortable, is that 5%, is that 10%, is it 50%? You know, and say, we're going to try some new things. We're going to put investment where it's not proven yet and see what happens. And sometimes if you put that toe in the water approach with whatever percent is comfortable, then, you know, year 2, year 3, that grows and grows, and finally you go, you know, this is a better place to put our investment.
We have time for one more question. I think there was yes.
So I wanted to pick up on Jean's comment that in the future we will see the direct grants being the smallest part, or a relatively small part. And I feel like there's this vehicle that's out there that foundations and philanthropists can use that's between a grant and direct investment. And in the institutional foundations, it's called program-related investments. Yeah. But I wonder if there's room for that among individual and high net worth individuals, because you can effectively use it to de-risk the problem. Take the first loss, engage other money, private sector money to come in if somebody else is going to take the loss, and just build the pie. And it strikes me that there's so much money left on the table by not using these tools, and I'd be curious to the panelists' response.
Put up slide number 9.
Yeah.
Who wants to take that one?
So PRIs, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, it's a way you can actually, if you're a foundation, take portions of your investment or your grant money and apply them in an investment. In most cases, it has to be under market rate returns. But we're going to have a panel tomorrow morning that I want to invite everyone in this room to on impact investing, where we're going to talk about these other tools like PRIs. When you think about it, most foundations put a corpus together and spend out 5% of it. Yet those people are really passionate about changing the world. You would never take 5% of something and say, I'm changing the world. They leave the rest of it. In fact, 0.1% of all foundation grants are used in this PRI kind of way. So huge, huge potential. That, loan guarantees, straight up grants for overhead, these things can be transformational in bringing new ideas forward.
Wasn't it wonderful to start the day off feeling so good about giving back and about what the folks on this stage are doing? Thanks very much, everybody, to our distinguished panel. Thanks for joining us.